Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Boeing shares are lower by 4% with labor unrest for the plane maker. For the first time in 16 years, factory workers at Boeing have walked off the job. Members of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, which represents 3,000 Boeing employees across the West Coast, have voted overwhelmingly to do what you just heard, to strike. Bloomberg aviation reporter Danny Lee says those members ignored a plea for peace by new Boeing Chief Executive Officer Kelly Ortberg.
This is a new low for Boeing, considering all the things that have happened to it over the past several months, and the fact that Kelly Ortberg was brought in to fix all the issues that are piling up for Boeing. This is going to be a true test of his resolve, his ability to show that for the board who hired him, how quickly he can fix things, because he had a strong track record at his previous company. So what can he do to perhaps personally intervene and knock some sense into the previous negotiating talks to see what more can Boeing offer? Frankly, the 25% over 4 years, clearly not enough for the workers, particularly the fact that the annual bonus was being taken away.
Bloomberg aviation reporter Danny Lee says 96% of union members supported the strike. Boeing shares, as I said, are down nearly 4% this morning.
Well, Nathan, we're also focusing on the Fed this morning ahead of next week's rate decision. Former Bank of New York Fed President Bill Dudley says there's scope for a half-point rate cut. Speaking at a forum organized by the Bretton Woods Committee in Singapore, the Bloomberg opinion columnist suggested the slowing jobs market is now a more serious concern than inflation. However, Mohammed Al-Arian, Queens College Cambridge president and also a Bloomberg opinion columnist, is expecting a quarter-point cut.
We won't get dramatic series of 50s, but we will be measured for the wrong reason. We'll be measured because the Fed will remain overreactive, meaning it will be too data dependent. I think the key issue about Greenspan, Bernanke, and Yellen, what they were willing to lean forward and take a view of the economy. Chair Powell is not there yet.
And Mohammed Al-Arian speaking with Bloomberg's Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney yesterday. The Fed decision comes on Wednesday. For full Fed coverage, catch our special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance. The Fed decides at 1:30 p.m. Wall Street time this Wednesday on Bloomberg Radio and television.
And Karen, ahead of that Fed decision, gold has hit another record high. In fact, bullion is on track for a weekly gain of almost 3%. As for equities, they've rallied every day this week. The S&P 500 rose 0.75% yesterday. Nadia Lovell is senior U.S. equity strategist of global wealth management at UBS. She says it is still a good time to buy stocks.
You've got to put cash to work. I mean, the Fed is about to cut. We know that debate is still there, whether it's 25 basis points or 50 basis points, but the cutting cycle is starting. And therefore, what you're going to be able to yield on cash is going to continue to go down. And so we would look to be adding some of that cash into quality equities and also a bit into fixed income.
Nadia Lovell at UBS has a year-end target of 5,900 for the S&P 500. That's 5% higher than yesterday's close.
Well, Nathan, some stocks on the move this morning. Shares of Adobe down more than 8%. The company, known for its software for creative professionals, gave a revenue forecast for the current quarter that missed Wall Street estimates. That's fueling investor impatience for Adobe's AI tools to begin generating sales.
On the flip side, Karen, shares of Oracle are up 6%. The software maker says annual revenue will rise to at least $104 billion in fiscal 2029. Analysts say it's an optimistic signal on the growth prospects of Oracle's cloud infrastructure business.
Well, Nathan, turning to the race for the White House, if you've been wondering whether there will be another debate between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, Bloomberg's Amy Morris tells us we have a pretty good indication now it is not going to happen.
Donald Trump ruled out another debate with an all-caps declaration on Truth Social. Quote, "There will be no third debate." He insists he won their first debate, so he doesn't need to participate in another one. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke at a campaign event in Charlotte, North Carolina, shortly after Trump's statement.
I believe we owe it to the voters to have another debate.
It is not clear if the vice president was directly responding to Trump's post. Trump and Harris's running mates, Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio and Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are slated to hold their own debate on October 1st with CBS News. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thank you. And sticking with politics, Donald Trump's making a new pledge if he's elected. No taxes on overtime pay. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Seeking to gain footing after the shaky debate, this is an effort by him and his strategist to change the focus from debates and hit the road to rallies and promises. This one in Arizona aimed at blue-collar workers that he needs to win. He says the people who work overtime are among the hardest working citizens in our country. Now, over the last 3 months, Trump has rolled out a steady drumbeat of tax cut plans. He has not explained yet how to pay for them, and a Bloomberg review says they would add more than $10.5 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed, thank you. Well, Nippon Steel and United States Steel sent a letter to President Joe Biden earlier this month on the Japanese company's proposed takeover of its American peer. The letter was signed by both companies' CEOs. Nippon Steel has been mounting a last-ditch attempt to try and muster support for the $14.1 billion takeover attempt, which faces widespread political opposition in the U.S. ahead of the presidential election in November. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. The Justice Department preparing criminal charges in connection with an Iranian hack that targeted Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Let's get details from Washington. Bloomberg's Steve Potusk.
The prospect of criminal charges comes as the Justice Department has raised alarms about aggressive efforts by countries, including Russia and Iran, to meddle in the presidential election. It was not immediately clear when the charges might be announced. Assistant Attorney General Matthew Olson, the Justice Department's top national security official, said in a speech Thursday Iran is making a greater effort to influence this year's election than it has in prior election cycles, and that Iranian activity is growing increasingly aggressive as this election nears. In Washington, Steve Potusk, Bloomberg Radio.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has arrived in Washington. It comes ahead of a meeting with President Biden. Sources are telling Bloomberg the U.S. and UK are discussing allowing Kyiv to conduct strikes inside Russia using British cruise missiles backed by U.S. navigational data. Speaking yesterday, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned against the move.
This will be their direct participation, and this, of course, will significantly change the very essence, the very nature of the conflict. This will mean that NATO countries, the US, and European countries are at war with Russia.
Putin there through an interpreter. The discussion comes after the U.S. confirmed that Moscow has received shipments of ballistic missiles from Iran. Crews are battling 3 wildfires east of Los Angeles. In San Bernardino County, there's a red glow in the sky and a strong haze in the air as the flames continue. 30 fires have scorched more than 100,000 acres across Southern California. Elon Musk has labeled the Australian government as fascist over proposed new laws to crack down on digital misinformation, particularly on social media websites. Under the proposed legislation, which have yet to pass Parliament, social media companies could be fined up to 5% of their annual revenue. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, John Tucker, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Yankees and Red Sox. First of 4 at the stadium, and Gleyber Torres led off the game with a home run. Just made it over the wall into the first row of seats in right field. Yanks did not score again for the next 9 innings. Anthony Volpe came up in both the 4th and 6th innings with the bases loaded both times. Flew out to left. Red Sox got a game-tying Danny Jansen home run in the 5th off Nestor Cortez. The game was tied at 1, bottom of the 10th.
2-2. Soto grounds it towards the middle. Base hit for Soto. Birdie around third. Rafaela comes up throwing on a hop. Birdie slides. Save. Juan Soto wins the game.
WFAN 2-1 Yankee wins, second straight in extra innings. It puts them 2 full games ahead of idle Baltimore. The Yankee bullpen was terrific. 4 relievers followed Cortez for the night. The Yanks in 10 innings allowed only 4 Boston hits. They had 14 strikeouts. All 4 teams vying for the 3 NL wildcard spots had the night off. That includes the Mets, who play tonight in Philadelphia. The Phillies 30 games over 500. They're 50-25 at home. Thursday night football to kick off week 2. All Buffalo in Miami, 31-10. The Bills' James Cook scored 3 first-half touchdowns. Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa had 3 interceptions. 1 was returned for a TD. He later left with a concussion. He had 2 of them 2 years ago. The Bills have now beaten the Dolphins 14 of the last 16. The Jets have brought back center Connor McGovern. He went down last year with a knee injury. He was planning to retire, but the Jets worked him outside into the practice squad. Rafael Nadal was hoping to play next week's Laver Cup in Berlin. The feeling was it would be the last event of his career, but Nadal has withdrawn, saying other players are more deserving. So it's certainly possible that Nadal's career with 22 Grand Slam titles is now over. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager. Boeing is grounded. As of midnight Pacific time, members of the plane makers' largest union on the West Coast have walked off the job for their first strike in 16 years. John Holden is president of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers.
This is about respect. This is about addressing the past, and this is about fighting for our future.
And this could be a crippling move for a company still reeling from the quality control issues found on its 737 MAX jet just at the start of the year. For the latest, we are joined now by Bloomberg's Danny Lee. Danny, good morning. This was, from what we understand, an overwhelming strike vote. Why did the rank and file reject this offer?
Yeah, Nathan, good morning. Well, clearly the vote was a signal of just how poor the union members thought this deal was. 33,000 of them voting, and you can see the strength of the rejection. And look, you can see how Boeing responded. They were quite conciliatory in their tone, acknowledging that the fact that they were committed to resetting this relationship with the unions. And, you know, you just look at what the deal was put in front of members, 25,000, to 25% rather, increase in salary over 4 years, but losing annual bonuses. That was not enough. And when union members wanted something more like 40%, there is a big gap there between what Boeing is offering and what the union members really want. And so this is a first kind of mini blow to new CEO Kelly Ottberg, drafted in to try and sort out not just this, but a wider set of problems with Boeing related to their business, its operations, its finances, its culture. And so it's now down to him to see his true resolve of what he can do, and particularly how quickly he can get things back on track.
So what can he do at this point? Where do contract talks go from here?
Well, we need to see both sides getting round a table, or a very big table, frankly. And the union overnight saying it was planning and keen to have more talks as quickly as possible. For Boeing, they've not given an indication yet of when they will talk. I'm sure both sides will get together soon. The challenge is, what will be put on the table first by Boeing? Clearly, the first offer not good enough, and the question over salary, over job security, and other entitlements such as healthcare and retirement. So there's a lot Boeing still has to put together, and the clock is ticking, frankly, with the amount of money that it risks burning through this strike. The fact that its factories now in Seattle, where many of its commercial jets are built, most of them, the fact that it's down tools now, and the fact that they will not be able to deliver planes to customers, and therefore they cannot bring in the cash to arrest what is a wider serious issue, its cash burn and its stress on its balance sheet.
So we're at the very early stages of this, obviously, so much more to come as we continue monitoring what is the beginning of the first strike for Boeing's largest union in 16 years. Thanks for keeping us updated on it. Danny Lee of Bloomberg News with us this morning as this strike is just getting underway. Now we want to turn to our exclusive conversation with the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Before Boeing's union members voted to strike, he sat down with Bloomberg's Saleha Mohsen on the Big Take DC podcast. They talked about trust in air travel, the safety concerns at Boeing, and getting the plane maker back on track. They began with the question of whether Pete Buttigieg enjoys flying commercial, given airline concerns.
Mostly. I think we've all had our headaches. I am on an airliner, maybe not every day, but almost. And like millions of Americans, experience the benefits, but also the huge frustrations that go with air travel. We've worked hard to establish America's safety record that has made air travel the safest way to get around. We work hard to keep it that way and press the airlines to do their part. And then there's the customer service side, where it's clear that airlines need to do a better job of taking care of passengers. And we have not just pressed them and encouraged them to improve their performance, but introduced new passenger rights that have created protections that didn't exist just a few years ago and that we think are much needed and overdue.
What is the Transportation Department under Secretary Pete Buttigieg doing to make holiday travel a little less frustrating this year?
Well, the first thing we've done is press the airlines to improve their performance. It's one of the reasons why last year saw the lowest rate of flight cancellations in about a decade. And we're working to make sure that through things like realistic scheduling and adequate staffing, they build on improving that record. The other thing that's important is that they take care of passengers when there is a delay or an issue. One of the things we've done is introduce a new tool, flightrights.gov, that's got airline by airline information about what you can expect your airline to do to take care of you when you have a problem. And those are customer service promises that we enforce and hold them accountable for meeting. We've also taken action to increase the benefits that go back to a customer when there's an issue. For example, automatic refunds when your flight is canceled, something that has been a real headache and led to us imposing hefty penalties on airlines that weren't following through. We're trying to take the drama out of that by saying that you don't even have to ask to get a refund. And lastly, a lot of enforcement. We have issued the toughest enforcement actions in the history of the department in cases like that of Southwest Airlines that melted down almost 2 winters ago now and left so many passengers stranded. We're investigating what happened with Delta over the summer right now.
So this holiday season, November and December, can consumers expect that some of these things are already in play? We can expect that we can sit with our family members, as Joe Biden promised. We can expect that we can get refunds the way you're describing?
As a passenger today, you have protections that you did not have a year ago or 2 years ago or more, and we're going to continue building on those. So yes, if you're heading to see family for the holidays, for example, those automatic refund protections are the law of the land now. And if you don't get treated that way, let us know because we'll follow up with enforcement. We have seen more airlines comply with what we've been asking them to do with regard to family seating. And for passengers who are wheelchair users, now we've been acting to make sure that they have a better experience because some of the stories we've heard about what they have faced traveling on airlines are just completely unacceptable. And we're developing rules that would change that experience and empower those passengers significantly.
You're talking about enforcement, and penalties is one aspect there. Are you thinking millions of dollars? How high a penalty are you willing to levy on these airlines?
Well, in the case of Southwest, it was a $140 million enforcement action, which was more than we had seen in a decade or more put together before that, partly because we thought it was very important to send a message to airlines. What we saw was that some of the past levels of penalties, $1 million here, $2 million there, really wasn't enough to change behavior. And we're going to continue to be ready to do that. Now, one thing I want to mention is when we talk about $140 million, that's not all cash going back to the Treasury. We did impose a cash fine of about $35 million. But part of what we did in the enforcement order was have the majority of those dollars actually go back to passengers in the form of vouchers, compensation, and other things that went back to the consumer. Because the whole point of this, of course, is to make sure consumers are better taken care of.
I want to talk about Boeing. What have you been able to do to get that company back on track?
Well, FAA took an unprecedented measure in restricting Boeing's ability to produce aircraft at a higher rate until they demonstrated the safety of their production and the quality of their production process. Aviation in America, by far the safest way to travel, and has made the last decade or two the safest period in the history of aviation. That means that when there is a near miss or an incident, something like the plug door blowing out in January in Alaska, we treat that as seriously as the FAA used to treat the most recent fatal crash. I think that's part of why they've been able to say that there has not been a fatal airliner crash in years. And again, it takes a lot of work to keep it that way. Boeing was put on notice that they were under a microscope. They've provided an updated plan, and now we are watching to see how they're doing at meeting the terms of that plan. They also have new leadership, and I've conveyed to Boeing the importance of them prioritizing a culture of quality and safety so that they can meet the FAA's expectations and really the expectations of the American public.
There's another place where trust in air travel is really low right now, since we're talking about trust. I'm talking about pricing and rewards transparency. So what it actually costs to take the trip that you've planned and the value of the loyalty points that you've signed up to get. One example that you guys have been working on at the department is a lot of work on junk fees. Share a little bit about what you're doing on that front with consumer protections.
We're making sure that you get refunded if you don't get what you paid for on your fees, same as we do on your ticket. So you pay for Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi doesn't work, you gotta get your money back. Same with baggage. We have another rule about transparency, and this is really about making sure that you can tell when you're comparison shopping for an airfare, the all-in cost of the ticket that you're buying, including those ancillary fees for bags or picking a seat or something like that. I thought that being transparent about fees was a relatively low bar to require the airlines to meet. But when we finalized that as a rule, the airline industry lobby responded by suing us. We believe that our rule is based on strong legal authority, so we're standing our ground. But it's disappointing that they're so reluctant to do something I think most consumers would expect of anybody selling anything, which is to be upfront and transparent about what you're going to charge.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.